Hello, this is Krisha Gregorowitz with Fours Marsh Group. This video will review Section A of the 2018 Election Administration and Voting Survey, or EAVS. This section seeks to understand how individuals registered to vote between 2016 and 2018, and efforts to keep voter registration rolls up to date. You can find similar presentations for the other 5 sections of the survey on the EAVS portal and the Election Assistance Commission website. As you watch this video, you might want to follow along with the PDF version of this survey, which can be found on the Downloads page of the EAVS portal. Section A of EAVS asks for 4 types of data on voter registration. First, how many voters were registered and eligible to vote in the November 2018 election? Second, how many registration forms did your jurisdiction process between the 2016 and 2018 general elections? Third, how many confirmations of registration notifications did your jurisdiction send in that time period? Finally, how many voters were removed from the registration rolls during that time period? Question A1 asks how many people in your jurisdiction were registered and eligible to vote in the November 2018 election. This count should include anyone who registered before your jurisdiction's deadline and anyone who used same-day voter registration. However, you should not include anyone whose registration was received after the deadline or anyone who pre-registered to vote but was not 18 years old by the time of the election. Your jurisdiction might distinguish between active and inactive voters. Active voters have no additional processing requirements to fulfill before they can vote, while inactive voters require address verification before they can cast a ballot. If this distinction applies to your jurisdiction, then you will report the total number of active voters in A1B and the total number of inactive voters in A1C. These 2 cells should add up to the total number of registered and eligible voters you reported in A1A. However, if your jurisdiction doesn't count inactive and active voters separately, then you will again report the number of registered and eligible voters in question A1B, so that A1A and A1B will report the same number. Then for A1C, you will enter -88 if you're using the Excel data collection template, or select the Does Not Apply checkbox if you're using the online data template. Question A2 asks about same-day voter registration. If your jurisdiction allows anyone to register to vote on the same day as they cast a ballot, you'll report that data in A2A. When you calculate this number, you should include people who use same-day registration on Election Day, during the early voting period, or who registered and voted on a day when early voting and the voter registration period overlapped. If your jurisdiction does not allow for same-day voter registration, then you will report -88 if you're using the Excel template, or Does Not Apply if you're using the online template for A2A. The rest of Section A asks you to report data from a very specific time period, which is the close of registration for the 2016 general election through the close of registration for the 2018 general election. For example, let's say your registration period closes 15 days before a general election. That means the last day to register for the 2016 general election was October 24th, 2016. So your reporting period for this EAVS will begin on October 25th, 2016. Since the last day to register to vote for the 2018 general election is October 22nd, 2018, that date will be the end of your reporting timeframe. Or let's say your state allows for Election Day registration and voters can register at their polling place when they vote in person on Election Day. In this case, you'll report data from November 9th, 2016 through November 6th, 2018. Again, state laws on registration deadlines vary widely. While you're answering the remainder of Section A, keep in mind how your state's registration deadlines apply so that you can answer these questions correctly. Question A3 asks about registration forms your jurisdiction received during that time frame we just discussed. In A3A, you'll report the total number, and in the rest of the question, you'll break down this total by the type of registration form. If the correct category doesn't appear in A3B through G, you can use one of the other categories in H, I, or J, along with a description of the category. The numbers you report in A3B through J should sum to the total number of registration forms that you reported in A3A. Please note that same-day registrations, Election Day registrations, and special category voters should not be reported separately in this question. For instance, if someone in your jurisdiction registered to vote on Election Day and a submitted form that was invalid or rejected, then you should report that registration form in A3E and not one of the other categories. The next set of questions continues to ask about registration forms your jurisdiction received between 2016 and 2018 general elections. Questions A4 through A7 ask about how these registration forms were submitted to your election office. Voters have many options for how they register to vote. Many voters use a paper form that they submit themselves by mail, fax, or email. Or they can complete the paper form at an agency office, such as the DMV or a public assistance office. Other people use an online voter registration portal or register in person. Other folks register as part of registration drives organized by a political party or advocacy group. For each of the modes of registration, questions A4 through A7 ask you to report the total number of forms received and how many of the forms were new registrations, how many were duplicates of existing registrations, and how many were invalid or rejected. This data will help the EAC track trends in voter registration across jurisdictions and across elections. For this set of questions, it's important to focus on the mode used to submit the registration application. A few notes as you answer these questions. First, A4 through A7 are asking you to further break down the totals you reported in question A3 according to the mode used to submit the registration application. So the numbers you report in A4A through A4L should sum to what you reported in A3A. Likewise, the numbers you report in A5A through A5L should sum to what you reported in A3B, and so on. If any registrations were reported through a mode that's not listed in these questions, you can use one of the other options and include a description of the mode. Finally, for states that automatically register people to vote when they receive a driver's license, these forms are considered to have come from the DMV for purposes of the EAVS survey. The final questions in Section A are about people removed from your jurisdiction's registration list. For states that are subject to the National Voter Registration Act, or NVRA, that legislation requires 3 conditions to be met before a person can be removed: indication of a change of address, plus a failure by the registrant to respond to a confirmation mailing, plus a failure to vote in the second federal general election after that confirmation mailing. Please note that your jurisdiction may use another term to describe these confirmation notices, such as removal notice. For question A8A, you'll report the total number of confirmation notices your jurisdiction sent out. For each notice, further classify it according to the categories listed in the question. If the notice was returned confirming an individual is still eligible to vote in your jurisdiction, record it in A8B. If the notice was returned confirming the individual is no longer eligible, record it in A8C. If the notice was returned as undeliverable, record it in A8D. If the status of the notice is unknown, record it in A8E. If your jurisdiction has another classification for these notices, report it in one of the other categories in F, G, or H. The numbers you report in A8B through A8H should equal the total number of confirmation notices you reported in A8A. If your jurisdiction is exempt from NVRA, please still report data in A8, but use the comment space to explain why voters received a confirmation notice and how your jurisdiction's definition of confirmation notices differs from the NVRA's definition. Finally, in question A9, you'll report how many voters your jurisdiction removed from the registration list between the 2016 and 2018 general elections. Keep in mind that this question only applies to voters fully removed from the rolls, not voters who were moved to an inactive status. The total number of removed voters will be recorded in A9A, and in the rest of the question, you'll specify the reasons for removal. If the reason isn't already listed in A9B through G, you can use one of the other options in H, I, and J. The numbers you report in A9B through A9J should sum to the total number of removed voters that you reported in A9A. We appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. We encourage you to carefully read through each section before answering any of the questions to ensure you're accurately reporting your jurisdiction's data. The easiest way to view the survey and its instructions is to access the PDF version of the 2018 survey on the Downloads page of the EAVS portal. We also encourage you to use the comment boxes for each question to provide us with additional information and context. This will help us analyze and report your data accurately. If you need additional assistance, please don't hesitate to contact us at EAVS@forestmarshgroup.com. All emails sent to that address will be answered within 1 business day. Thank you, and we appreciate your time and your contributions to the 2018 EAVS survey.